remarks, I will also direct everybody to certain links where you can see the previous recordings, materials, and exchanges in our community space. Anyway, greetings, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Elena Nicholson. I'm Director of Development and Community Relations at Fielding, and I work in tandem with the wonderful Hilary Lynn, who is Director of Alumni Relations. She was not able to be here today, but she also sent her greetings. You're joining second in a series of 4 workshops this year that were possible thanks to the Jean-Pierre Isbouts Endowed Fund in Lifelong Learning. This endowed fund has 2 purposes. One is to support alumni and students as they go into the world as scholars practitioners, and to enable publishing your work through Fielding University Press. And besides publishing your work, also help you really turn your dissertation and your research into publishable book, whether with Fielding University Press or elsewhere. I want to say a very big thank you to alum Dr. Pauline Albert, who actually envisioned this endowment and really cares for university's future, university sustainability, as well as making sure that the names of our alumni go out there in the world, and your work, which all your work is passion projects to make the world and the community a better place for all, that it gets published and other people get to read it. Another component of the endowment is the Travel with Fielding program. We've had so far 2 wonderful trips, and anybody can join. And we've actually already formed a group for September of this year where we'll travel with Dr. Isbouts to Florence and get to spend 6 perfect days with him and alumni and trustees to explore this beautiful site in the world. And our future trips, which you'll be seeing soon on our social media and sites, will be to Vienna in September of 2023 and Paris in 2024. And just to remind you that Fielding is turning 50 years old, celebrates its 50, if Fielding was a person, celebrates its anniversary in 2024. So that's, we are approaching a very significant step in our university's life. So before I pass back Mike to absolutely wonderful Jean-Pierre, I wanted to give a few seconds to Dr. Albert to talk why she's here, her vision, and she's also writing a book to share some ideas. Dr. Albert.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you, Jean-Pierre, for your willingness to do this. I have been extraordinarily inspired by Jean-Pierre during our trips and all his publishing. I've read many of his books, though not all of them, because there are more than I ever realized. But I just wanted to say it's never too late. I graduated in 2009, and since then have been doing lots of workshops, having inverted my dissertation and teaching Franciscans. My dissertation was on the leadership of Saints Francis and Clare of Assisi, as I was in quest of new paradigms of leadership. And I really wanted to publish a book based on my dissertation, but the opportunities never really presented itself until very recently. And I now have a book contract. And it is based on all these workshops that I've done over the last 10 years. So my message to each and every alum is it's never too late. And the experience of taking the research out in the world really formulated it into something that was publishable. The irony also is that I had this academic-like title in mind that was based on CMM, Coordinated Management of Meaning from Barnett Pearce. And it was through simply chatting with the Franciscans and working with them that I realized that the central theme of Franciscanism is love. And that did not directly come out of my dissertation. It came out of my work with them and branding exercises and consulting that I've done. So the title of my book is called Leading with Love, Walking with Francis and Clare of Assisi. And I think Leading with Love will be an attractive title, much more so than Making Better Social Worlds, which is where my head was at as an academic. So this whole notion of inverting your research is so critical to finding success in the publishing world. And I just wanted to share that because it's never too late. Thank you, Jean-Pierre.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you so much, Pauline. And you know, I just want to, I'm sure you're here because you've heard about Jean-Pierre and his work in the world, but I just want to reiterate that this is a really unique opportunity because, like Jean-Pierre said, he just traveled across the world for a filming project, and he's really one of the best-selling authors in the whole entire world with his Biblical World, wonderful book. And ultimately, if you haven't seen it, the ultimate visual history of the world, published by National Geographic, already listed as Amazon's bestseller. It's already a best-selling book in the community. He is an award-winning writer, producer, film director, and we really lucky because Jean-Pierre is today, as Pauline once said, Leonardo da Vinci. You know, he's really, we are experiencing somebody who is astronomical proportion scholar and prolific writer. So I hope that you appreciate that this Saturday, even though jet lagged, Dr. Jean-Pierre Isbouts came here to help us learn how to make sure that we become published authors. So Jean-Pierre, with that, the mic is yours. Take us away.
Thank you very much, Elena. Thank you, Pauline, for your vision. Folks, we're going to talk about inverting your dissertation into a book. Now, it's funny because one of you wrote an email, I'm not sure it was to Elena or to me, that said, should it be converting a dissertation into a book? And that's exactly not what we're talking about. When we talk about converting a dissertation in a book, that implies that you're basically going to take elements from your dissertation and turn it into a book. That is not the process that we're talking about today. The process is really turning your dissertation inside out and redefining your research. The research is still there, but redefining the research in an entirely different way that will appeal to a broad readership. And the question is why should you publish a book? And I'm just basically picking up where we left off during the February seminar. It's so important for you to publish your dissertation because it will establish you as an expert in your chosen field. Why else would you want to become a PhD, right? Or an EDD? Why else did you go through that whole process of a doctoral study at Fielding? Is because you want to be recognized as an expert in your chosen field. And so I believe, based on my experience, which I talked about during the last workshop, and I'm not going to reiterate that again, other than to say that I had published works before, but I really hadn't made much of an impact until The Biblical World, a book that I wrote for National Geographic in 2006, which sold 250,000 copies at a $40 price point, a hardcover, which was unprecedented in the history of National Geographic. And since then, I think I've written 15 or 16 books for National Geographic. I was walking in Bari, Italy, a few days ago, and they have these kiosks in Italy where they sell a lot of stuff. And lo and behold, I found a magazine version of one of my books in Italian. I didn't even know it was available in Italian. So, and it all started because I worked very hard to have one of my books published. And, I remember when I drafted the idea for The Biblical World, I had more reject letters that I knew what to do with. I could paper my wall with it. So many publishers had declined. And so if for any reason whatsoever, your first proposal or your first approach to a publisher is declined, that should not be an indication that your work is bad. Of course, they all wish they had published it now, but only National Geographic decided to take the plunge. So it's so important to do this process because a book will give you credibility. and exposure that you will not get by simply depositing your dissertation in ProQuest. It's important that you do that, of course, but you need to have a book, and it will give you such a sense of fulfillment. It will give you such a sense of satisfaction to have this work, this book published, have it up there in a shop or on Amazon. I mean, it's an incredible sense of achievement, and that's what I want you to experience. I mean, it's only right for the tremendous investment that you've made. It is a calling card in your career. If you want to pitch the conferences are starting to start again. Even live conferences are beginning again. If you say you're a published author, it will give you a certain cachet that will certainly boost your chances of being selected as a speaker. If you want to go for a grant, the idea that you are a published author is so important because it gives you, again, that credibility that we need as scholars. So the question that you, at this point, you have to ask yourself is your work publishable? Is your dissertation publishable? And the specific question you have to ask yourself is, what new and unique insights has your study produced?
No.
You know, and that's interesting because I have been involved with, I don't know, 75 dissertations during my tenure at Fielding. And the question that I always ask during the FOR is, tell me in 30 seconds, what unique insights has your dissertation? What do we know that we didn't know before because of your dissertation? And I even warn my students that I'm going to ask that question. And very often they go, well, you know, it's very, you know, I said, no. Tell me in 30 seconds. Give me 5 things that your study has revealed to the academy, to scholarship. And very many students struggle with that question. So that's a very important part of what we're doing here, is to really sit down and ask yourself, regardless of whether you're still working on your dissertation or whether you just finished it yesterday, or in the case of Pauline, whether you finished it 11 years ago, is to ask yourself, now, what has my work contributed that we didn't know before? And grab a yellow pad, either now or afterwards, whatever, and write that down. What are the 5 or the 6 or the 10 unique things that your study has yielded that we didn't know before? Because those are going to be very important for the exercise that we're going to be doing in a few minutes. Okay, very, very important. And so put those up there in a yellow pad or in your iPhone, whatever, but you have to sort of condense the incredible work that you've done into 5, 7, or 10 manageable highlights. I call them 10 poles that will sustain the body of your book. What are those? And the next question is, what kind of a person is interested in reading that? You know, what kind of a, and you can say, well, everybody, but that's really maybe not very accurate. So think about, you know, what are these people and where do they live? Where do these readers live? Are they to be found in the public sector, in the private sector, in the academic sector? What type of person am I talking about? Am I talking about leaders? Am I talking about managers? Am I talking about employees? What am I talking about? Am I talking about a specific gender? Am I talking about a specific demographic? All those things are so important for you to write down, because it is in specifying these things that you basically create the outline of your book. You know, and this is what we covered during the last workshop, is that when you want to pitch your book to a publisher, these are the things they're going to ask about. They don't want to see your manuscript. They want to know what it is that your study has revealed, what makes it unique and special, and who is interested in that. These are the key questions that they want to hear before they're even going to look at your material or your manuscript. And then what is so important is what are the outcomes from your work that are of tangible benefit to practitioners, whether they're academic or professional. What are the tangible values, the aha things, oh, wow, this is useful for me. This is useful for the way I work as a leader, as a manager, as an executive, as an employee, as a mother, as a father. These are the tangible things that will enrich my life. That is what you need to define. That is much more important than anything else about your dissertation. These are the things that we need to know before. So, this PowerPoint will be available on the Alumni Association website. So if you want to download this PowerPoint as a little cheat sheet, be sure to do that. If you need to register, go to the Fielding Alumni Association website or send an email to Hillary Lynn, and she will be able to direct you to that. But all this material will be available. And the final question is, what is my dissertation's practical horizon? Very often when we talk about, for example, technology, learning technology, there is a limited horizon. Fielding we published late last year, beginning of this year, the updated version of the Handbook of Online Learning. And the authors of that book, we have 42 authors. It's a tremendously rich book. It's the biggest book we've ever published. It's 500 pages, but it's tremendously rich in its scope in terms of online learning anno 2022. What have we learned during the COVID pandemic when everybody started to learn via and teach via the online platform? Even campus-based organizations found themselves compelled to teach online. There's a tremendous wave of data that came out of that, and we captured it. We're the first ones to capture it. And that book is incredibly important, but it was necessary because the previous version of that book, which was published by Sage, was completely out of date because of the technology involved. So if your dissertation in any way or form is leveraged by technology or anything else that has an expiration date, you need to ask yourself, what is my practical horizon? Also comes back to the literature, of course, that you use, which we'll talk about in a minute, okay? Now, I've often talked about argument in my tenure at Fielding because I feel that argumentation is the one skill set that at Fielding is not well represented. And so what I tried to do while I was still a full-time professor at media psychology and then later at HOD was to teach a seminar about argumentation. I think our program is very much focused on theory, which is important, but it is using the theory to make a case, to make a point, to make a presentation that is so important. I mean, I'm a product of an European education, even though I did my doctoral work at Columbia in New York. Up to that point, I was a product of Leiden University in Holland. And argumentation and debating was bread and butter of our program. Bread and butter of our program. And so I keep urging my colleagues to really reintegrate that aspect because writing is argumentation. It's not about regurgitating theory or reproducing literature. It's about making an argument. We're going to talk about that today. Making an argument. So identifying the core argument starts with asking yourself, what is it that I want to accomplish? So that we know the readership, we know what the key tentpoles are in terms of insights. The next question is, what do I want to accomplish with my book? And not just, in terms of your career, which is important, but what I want people to take away. I love that word, the takeaway. What's the takeaway? What story do I want to tell? And what impact do I want this story to have on the world at large? We all want to be change agents. That's great. How is that going to work in the terms of my dissertation? It's important because that is what you're doing in answering these questions is identifying the core argument of your dissertation. That is, what story do I want to tell? Argumentation is simply another word for telling a story. That's it, you're telling a story. But the story has to make sense, right? It has to have logic throughout the development of your story. Just like the great storytellers of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Ramayana. These are stories that have logical development, and it's that we're going to look at very much today. So ways to publish your dissertation. Your book, of course, is not the only way to publish your dissertation. You can write a journal article, and if you're pursuing an academic career, that is a sine qua non to have an aspect of your dissertation, not the whole dissertation, because you want to hold something back. But a journal article in a peer-reviewed journal is important. A conference paper. These are all elements whereby you can profile yourself as a scholar. A blog. If you don't have a blog yet, this is something you should have. There are so many free blogs out there, platforms. You should write a blog about don't wait for your dissertation to be finished. Start today and have a weekly update on your blog. Make it a diary of how you write your dissertation, all the things that you encounter, the challenges you encounter, the insights, the decisions you have to make in that process would make for a wonderful weekly blog, wouldn't it? And in the process, you develop your readership. A video for social media. We're going to talk about all that in our last workshop, which is in December, when we talk about promoting. So today we're talking about creating the book. In September, we're going to talk about publishing the book. And in December, we're going to talk about promoting the book, which is as important as actually producing the book. But the published book is our subject for today. And I've gone through this in February, so I'll be very quick. But the reason why a dissertation is not publishable is because it's a kludge. And the reason is that it's pulled apart. All the elements that make up the tapestry of your argumentation are separated into isolated blocks. Now, there is a reason for that, because as your faculty, we want to know that, can she do a literature review? Can he do a methodology design? Can she report her research results in an objective way that can be used by other scholars? Can he make a cogent discussion of the data? These are all benchmarks by which we determine whether you are ready to be a PhD. And so there is a reason why these elements are separated into isolated blocks. But of course, it doesn't make for a book. Nobody wants to read a dissertation and it'll pull your hair out, All of this material is important from an educational perspective, but it does not work as a book. Dissertation is not a book. So the challenge for you, your mission, should you decide to accept it, is to completely recast the form of your dissertation, not the research, not the data, but the way you present it. Because the key insights that we just talked about, the 10 poles, remember that? They must populate every chapter from the beginning. Every chapter from the beginning has to have some of those rich insights that your dissertation has produced. Look, when you pick up a book in the library, do you want to wait until chapter 12 to finally see some of the key insights that you're looking for? Of course not. You want to see that starting the chapter 1. So that is what I call the inversion process. To invert your dissertation, say, okay, what are my key points? What is it, the story I want to tell? And how am I going to tell it? So very important. Once you have that list of the key highlights, of your key data points, then that's going to be the structure of your chapters. And every chapter has to have some of those golden nuggets that will hold the attention of your readership. At the same time, you're going to have to translate things that are very theoretical in nature into real world ideas that are practical value to your reader. And of course, you know what your reader is because we just went through that exercise. You know who your reader is, where he or she can be found, what he or she is looking for, what he or she is expecting from your book. Okay, so try to theory. I'm not saying we're not going to have any theory in your book. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that you have to present those insights as things that can be put to use, that are of practical value. Okay. Am I making sense right now? As I said, you write down your questions, because after the little break, which will be at 10:30 Pacific, we're going to have a conversation. And I want to see lots of feedback from you. I want to see lots of questions as it relates to your dissertation, as it relates to your book, your unique challenges, what you see as your things that you must grapple with as you invert your dissertation to a book. So be prepared for that conversation at whatever that is, 10:40 or so, when we pick it up again. I want to hear from you and see if this works for you. Now, what I do and what I suggest you do as you spec out your book is to develop an outline with short chapter descriptions of all the things we just talked about. Okay, I'm going to give you a few examples because it's always good to have a few examples. But before we do that, a few writing style guidelines. I forbid you to copy and paste for your dissertation. Please don't do that, because then it becomes a kludge when you have disjointed pieces from your dissertation copy and pasted in. Please regenerate your ideas afresh. Okay, do it fresh. Start writing fresh. Even in the case of Pauline, if it's been a few years, you have some distance now from that material, so you can really rethink that. How do I present these points that I want to make? How do I present my chapter? So please do not copy paste. Please write your book afresh. Create an authentic narrative arc, your story designed for the book, of course, based on your insights from your dissertation. Avoid long run-on sentences. This is a pet peeve of mine. When I got a dissertation with these long sentences with lots of jargon, I sent it back. I said, how about we write this dissertation in normal English? What a thing, right? Write it in normal English. Make it accessible. Make it accessible to your reader. Don't try to impress them. We don't need to be impressed. We need to be persuaded. You need to persuade and inspire your reader. That's what you need to do. So write in very accessible and in normal English. I'm going to give you a little, if you have heard this before, I apologize. We're going to go through it very quickly. But I wrote a book several years ago called The Search for Heaven. Because the discussion of the afterlife, this day and age, is almost entirely limited to religious domains. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But I have come to realize, based on my research, that, and that of my collaborators, because a very well-known British psychic, Sue Dunderdale-Jones, was a major contributor. And there were 6 wonderful Fielding students who did tremendous hard work in researching a particular scientific domain for this book. This book is not just based on psychic experiences. It's not just based on near-death experiences. It has physics. It has quantum mechanics. It has all kinds of, it has history. It has all kinds of tremendous, rich insights from my collaborators that you see here, and I owe it much to them. I'm in a fundraising drive, actually, to make a film. We were going to do a film about it, but then COVID intervened. But right now I'm in a fundraising drive to produce a film about this book, which is so important to our understanding of who we are and what we're doing on Earth and what the role of our consciousness is. And one of the things that we together arrived at is that our consciousness is immortal. Our consciousness, our sense of self, will survive our physical death. So what we did at the beginning is we did exactly what I just talked about. We broke it down into a chapter with a brief description of what this is about. And I start with the story of Bali because that's the one place on Earth where spirits and spirituality is not a matter of religion exclusively. It's a matter of going to the marketplace and go shopping. It's a matter of picking flowers. Spirits and spirituality completely permeate that society in a way that no other society does in the world today. Then, based on the wonderful work of one of my students, we talk about energy and the fact that we're not just physical matter, we're actually 50% physical and 50% energy. It's measurable, the energy that our bodies produce. For Asian teachings, Laura Sherwood did a wonderful chapter about that. And then we talk about near-death experiences, which are incredibly powerful attestations of the fact that our consciousness survives death. I mean, we cite over 3,000 near-death experiences, not just in the United States, but in other cultures such as Iran, Islamic cultures, Buddhist cultures, Jewish cultures. So it's something that supersedes the idea of a certain religious upbringing, if you will. Then we talk about quantum physics, what neurology has discovered about the brain and the separation of consciousness from the physical process of our brain. We continue with the psychic experience, what psychic experiences contribute to that. And then based on that, we reconstruct actually what religions would call heaven or nirvana or other things, which we call the spiritual universe, which is a very exciting thing, actually. It's the most exciting part of the book, where we actually go to the spiritual universe and figure out how it functions, all based on scientific evidence. And then finally, how does that spiritual universe compare to our religious beliefs, nirvana, olam haba, and all these things, paradise, and then living without the fear of death. That is the outcome of this book. Again, every book has to have an outcome. My purpose of this book, in writing this book with my students, is to take away your fear of death, that the passage of death to the next stage is simply a very normal physical process that's embedded in our DNA. It's nothing to be worried about, nothing to be concerned about. You know, I just lost a very dear friend of mine, Jason Oler. Some of you may know him. He was a Fielding faculty in media psychology. He was one of my dearest friends, and he passed away, and there was an outpouring of grief. But I know Jason is up there. He had lung transplants, which went awry. He suffered terribly. Right now, Jason is up there in the universe, and he is laughing and having a good time, probably teaching other spirits how to do iMovie films about their lives, which is what we've been doing all of these years together. Anyways, that is the process I want you to go through. Same thing, this book that Elena mentioned, the biggest book, my biggest book today, 650 pages, The History of the World, published by National Geographic last October. It took me 3 years to write, but it all started exactly with what I'm telling you to do. It all started with a single page, like that you see here. This book, which cost $1 million to produce and print, it started with a single page, a breakdown of the key 10 poles, the key points that I wanted to make in each of those 10 chapters. And then in a follow-up, I described each of those 10 chapters, what they should entail, what it should include. And based on that, I went to work. So that's exactly what I want you to do. The purpose of the outline is to distribute your key insights that are now in your data chapter and are now in your discussion chapter, to distribute those evenly across all chapters of your book. That is the purpose of the outline. And it's so important that you do that, because that is going to be the blueprint, the anchor of your book. Each of those key insights should form the basis of a chapter and the focus of your argument. That's why, as I said in the beginning, it's so important that you first start with that list of, gee, what are my key insights for my dissertation? What have I found, that is unique, that is special, that people want to know about? And so what the argument then is a fluid demonstration of your findings in each chapter, buttressed by the evidence that you have identified. So here we're taking chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, which are isolated elements, and we're weaving them together into a tapestry that is the story. And each chapter is an argument, is a storytelling element. Each chapter is a storytelling where you tell about your insights, but those insights now are supported by the evidence that you've identified. So things that came out of your literature review, things that came out of your data research are now part and parcel. They're integrated into the story that you are telling. And that evidence consists of three things. It is the literature, clearly, the theoretical underpinnings. It is your own research, your interviews, your quantitative research, whatever the research methodology that you chose. And three, and this is always missing, the just-in-time data. Now, we talked about just-in-time data because that's another thing that I advocated very strongly while I was still core faculty at Fielding, is because that is missing. So whenever you tell your story, every chapter, and you know now what you want to communicate in that chapter, your key insights, and you present those insights with the story in which you tell about the literature, what the literature says about it, what your own research says about it, but then most importantly, what the just-in-time data tells about it. Now, what are the just-in-time data? Just-in-time data are primary sources that you have culled about your topic from newspapers, magazines, TV, press releases, social media, or conferences. The reason why that is important is because you want to augment your interviews, which are biased because they're self-reports in many ways. Your interviews, they're self-reports, or in even your quantitative data is very often based on self-reports. Secondly, the literature that you identify, that you use in your dissertation, obviously is dated. Just getting a journal article published takes 2 years on average. So your literature and your self-reports are biased and dated. And so you want to enhance that with a stream of information that is just in time. And just in time is magazines. For example, I'm a subscriber to The Economist, which to me is the finest magazine in the world. I mean, everyone, each of you should be a subscriber to The Economist, because it's not just about the economy, despite its title. It talks about literature, it talks about art, it talks about psychology, it talks about history, it talks about politics, it talks about literally every genre of human knowledge, but it's just in time. It happened. What happened yesterday? What happened last week? And so if you can enhance each of your chapters with, for example, The Economist reported in May of 2022 that all of a sudden your work is now am Ort und Stelle, as the Germans say. You know, it is right in time. It is topical. It is timely. It is newsworthy. And so that just-in-time data should be part of the trifecta of the evidence for your book and in fact, the evidence for your dissertation. Literature, your own research, just-in-time data. And you know, read the New York Times. I mean, I have a whole stack of clippings every month of things I can use for my books, because the New York Times has tremendously important articles about a whole range of things. The Economist, there's many, many other sources, but those I would think for you are the most important ones. The New York Times and The Economist. The New York Times, American, The Economist, British, but very, very worldly in its own sense. So that's how you sort of eliminate or at least compensate for the inherent bias of self-reports and the data element of your literature. And then you go arguing your data. Ask yourself, is my chapter data credible? Does it provide the necessary evidence to support what I'm saying, my argument? Is my argument credible? How is this data relevant to the chapter I want to write? You know, make sure that the chapter doesn't go off into all kinds of tangents, you know. You're telling a story. You're telling a story. And as Aristotle said, the story has to have a logical start, middle, and an end. So make sure that you don't go off. You, of course, sometimes you want to illuminate some things with some examples. Absolutely, perfectly fine. But don't go off on it. Keep your focus on what is the point of this chapter, and make that a nice flowing story with a nice conclusion, if you will. And how does it contribute to my overall argument? So it's important that you explain how your data informs your argument. Now, when I say that the argument should be supported by data, it's very important that you also cite literature or data that does not agree with your argument. Why? Because that's what a scholar does. When a scholar makes a point, he cites or she cites data that is both pro and con the insights that you have. For example, I'm right now finishing a book. It's I promise, my last book about Leonardo da Vinci, I promise. But it is a big one. And in it, I cite, I would say, as much, if not more, literature references that don't agree with my position than those that do agree. Guess what? Why? Because now I come across as a credible scholar. Now I come across as a credible scholar because I haven't just read things that agree with me. I have read everything, or almost everything, pretty much everything. And based on my analysis of the everything, do I make an argument? And because I cite things that don't agree with me, as well as literature references that do agree with me, I'm like, do I come across as an authoritative figure? So it's important, and this goes for your dissertation as well, that you cite elements that are in support of your argument and those that are not. And then, of course, you explain why those that are not in agreement with your argument, why they're wrong. That's the whole idea, of course. You say, well, you know, Johnson in 2007 wrote an article that had a different view, and here's what he said, blah, 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 blah. But clearly he was not accurate, or his evidence was not appropriate because da, 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 da. When you do that, people say, huh, she really knows what she's talking about. And that's the impression you want to leave with your reader. She really knows what she's talking about because she cites things that don't necessarily agree with what she's writing about, but she clearly shows why they are wrong. See what I'm saying? That's the art of argumentation. That's the art of debating. And that's why I so wish that we spend more time on that at Fielding. You know, argumentation. It's so important. Scholarly writing. We're coming to the end of the first hour, so I want to leave you with a few now practical points about, now that we know how to structure our outline, we know how to write our chapters. Now, what do we do as we actually sit down and start writing? It's important, again, that every chapter is a logical argument with a beginning, middle, and end, and that together those chapters make a logical narrative across the entire book. And you won't be able to do that the first go around. I mean, you know, I always tell myself when I write a new book and I feel like, this is not really great. I said, keep writing, because writing is editing. Writing is editing. Before I send this big book, which is now in layout, before I send that big book to the publisher, I have at least 5 different drafts, because it's so much easier to edit something that you've already written than starting from scratch. And that's why, even if you feel like, I'm not sure if this is going to cut the broth, you know, keep writing, keep writing, keep writing, because there will come a point where you go back and now, okay, now I see what I'm missing, right? Or now I see where there are little bumps in the road. My dear friend Jason called it bumps in the road when transitions between paragraphs don't make sense. He called it bumps. And now you see that. So don't worry about it. Keep writing, go back, edit, write a little bit more, finish, go back, write a little bit more, until, just like Michelangelo carves a statue out of recalcitrant marble until it's nicely polished. You know, Michelangelo didn't do that in a day. You know, he carved David, and then he had to go back and change some things and then polish it. And that's what you're doing. You're a sculptor. You're a sculptor. You're creating a work of art. Make sure your written English is simple, lucid, and grammatically correct. If there is one thing that publishers hate, it's bad language. It's bad grammar. And if you write in Word, Word has tremendous tools now that will highlight for you when you have a spelling error, when you have a grammatical error. That can all be done. And of course, then there's grammarly.com that you should use if you feel that you're not very comfortable with your language. Just pass it through grammarly.com. I would like to pass a law. I have submitted this to Congress, or at least at Fielding, where the conjunction "and" is forbidden. It's forbidden, because that's how you create run-on sentences. Da 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 da, and da 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 da. No, make a new sentence. We're not charging you by the word. Make a new sentence. One thought, one sentence. That's my mantra. One thought, one sentence. Don't try to cram multiple ideas in one sentence. Why? Why? Use one sentence to communicate one clear idea, then move on to the next sentence, and so forth and so on. It is so much easier to read your book that way, rather than trying to, wait, what is she saying now? Right? You don't want your reader to have that. One idea, one sentence. The conjunction "and" is forbidden. Here's my famous motto. Scholarly writing is the art of articulating complex ideas in simple language. Complex ideas in simple language. That is the art of scholarly writing. Okay. Now here are some tips that I think it's very important. You know, I love what Pauline just said, you know, leading with love. We just got a whole bunch of proposals, as I mentioned earlier, for Field University Press. May 1st was the deadline. And almost everybody, even brilliant proposals, used these long titles. And usually there was a subclause. You know, there was a principal clause, semicolon, da 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 da. How am I going to fit that on the cover, right? And that is because academic journals love that. When you write an article in an academic journal, they love that. principal clause, subclause. It doesn't work as a title for a book, folks. It doesn't. It has to be pithy. Leading with love. Bang! I can see that in the cover. I can see it right now on the cover. That's what you have to do. Leading with, that's what's going to grab your reader. And then you can have something maybe small and cursive script underneath, you know, how Franciscans practice their leadership, something like that. But you need the core title. It's got to be 3, 4, 5 words maximum. Bang. The book I'm writing, the Leonardo book, is called Mona Lisa. Understanding the evolution of Leonardo's career as an artist. And of course, the book is about his entire oeuvre. But bang, Mona Lisa is what everybody knows. Right. Never insert spaces between paragraphs. I can tell you how much our copy editors struggle to eliminate that. It's a setting in Word. You go to your paragraph, drop down menu, paragraph, and then there is a button that you click. Do not insert spaces between paragraphs. It doesn't work in a book. Have you ever read a book where there are spaces between paragraphs? No, of course not. It's a flowing text. So do that. Don't do that in your manuscript. Always create an indent. We just had a manuscript that we spent weeks trying to insert an indent. Why? Because the person, the author, had indented everything with a tab key, and some of it is a 1/4 inch and some of it is a 1/2 inch. And she didn't read our author guide, which says you set a global indent in Word in the top nav bar with these 2 little icons on top. You just push the top one a 1/4 inch in, and then every new paragraph will automatically be indented a 1/4 inch. It's important because your book, whether you publish with us or with somebody else, will be an electronic book as well as a printed book. And especially for electronic books are incredibly sensitive to these things, incredibly sensitive, because they all need to be read on multiple platforms. So it needs to be, that's another reason why never copy and paste from another source. I know that's painful, but you just have to go through the process of retyping what it is you're going. When we have things that are clearly copied from a PDF or HTML, it completely corrupts the manuscript. You don't know that. You don't see that in Word. But when you go to an engineering book, to a MOBI format, which is what Amazon uses, or EPUB, which is what other formats use, those things all of a sudden create all kinds of weird characters. They completely destroy your manuscript to the point that it is not publishable. So do not copy and paste. Do not copy and paste. I say that every time when I have a meeting with authors and they still do it. I don't know why. But we send it back. Said, sorry, you got to clean it up. When you have DOI or URL strings, they should be included in the endnotes or the references, never in the body of the text. Why? Again, they corrupt the text. They corrupt the text. And when you do use a URL or DOI string in your bibliographical reference, for example, that's where we encourage you to do that. Make sure they're still active, click on it and make sure you don't go to something that says page not found. Because these are things from practice. This is what makes it very difficult for your publisher, whoever that may be, to publish your book. More formatting issues. We encourage you to write in 11 point with 1.5 spacing. That is the default format of most publishers. They may not use Times Roman, but Times Roman is one of those fonts that is supported across all platforms. So Times Roman 11 point, 1.5 spacing is the universal standard in publishing. So if your manuscript uses that to begin with, it makes it's so much more easier for your publisher to publish your work. Do not use any word auto formatting, such as, for example, bullet lists. You know, when you want to do a bullet list, oh, Word says, oh, stop. I'll make it for you. I'll make it for you. I have a bunch of gnomes sitting in the background. No. It again, there is corrupted data coming in. So paragraph spacing, bullets, numbered lists should all be done manually. They should not be done with auto formatting. Endnotes, don't use the word-generated superscripts, because again, that's data that most ebook platforms don't understand. They don't know what that is. Type in a numeral in brackets 1, and then in your endnotes, type that numeral again, type, and then write your endnote. Don't use word-generated superscripts. Word tables cannot be used. Why not? Because they're not scalable. I wish they were. But word tables, word-generated tables, and every dissertation has word-generated tables, they're not scalable. And guess what? You're typing in a format that's letter size 8.5 by 11, right? But most books are 6 by 9, sometimes 10 by 7, but certainly not 11 by 8. So what happens is your manuscript is reduced in size. Therefore, your tables must be reduced in size. And guess what happens when you reduce a word table? It scrambles all the data. All that wonderful quantitative data that you put in your table, it gets completely scrambled. So those are not allowed. Well, how do you deal with that? Well, you can do it. You can create a JPEG, for example. Most people do that. They do a screenshot in very high resolution, make it as big as you can on your laptop. You take a screenshot and then you crop it out and you make it a JPEG. No problem whatsoever. JPEGs are perfectly fine. Images should always be at least 6 inches wide and 150 dpi. That's just a little thing. And when you use images, and we love images. Your publisher will love images. There's no longer a printing problem. In today's technology, you can do black and white images with no problem integrated into text. But always make sure that they're captioned, and that you tell your reader where they're coming from, so that you don't run into royalty issues, copyright issues. There have been books that run into trouble because they used images from the internet without getting permission to do so. And your publisher will have you write a contract where you indemnify. It's a scary word, isn't it? Indemnify the publisher for any such legal breaches. So make sure that whatever images you use, and go to Shutterstock or archives like that, and you can, for $40, you can get an image. Actually, that's not true. Yeah, for less, if it's for academic, you get an image downloaded with a license, and you'll have no problem. Okay, we're going to stop right here for a moment. When we come back, we're going to talk about the 10 steps of writing a manuscript, and then we're going to go into a conversation. Okay, we're going to go to, I want to hear from you. We're going to get rid of the PowerPoint, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation. So let's stop for, I would say, 10 minutes. I'm going to run down and get a cup of tea. You can get a cup of coffee, and we'll come together again in 10 minutes. And I will pause the recording. Yes, here we go. Recording. And we're back for the second part. So let me just finish the PowerPoint, then we go over to our conversation. 10 steps of writing a manuscript. You write your first draft. Then based on your first draft, you get feedback from friends, family. I always ask our dog, Katie, the yellow Labrador dog, her opinion. If the tail goes up like that, it's positive feedback. Sometimes it does not. But it's important to get another person's perspective. Then based on that, you do your final draft. Again, this may take several draft cycles. Then copy edit. Typically, if you have a publisher, the publisher will provide a copy edit. If you will self-publish your book, again, the whole process of publishing, we're going to talk about in August. Then that's something you have to do yourself. And I will give you some names of people that we use at FUP who are substantially more affordable than people in the marketplace. We work with some really wonderful copy editors that are very, very affordable, but it is an important part of your process because you are blind to any errors that are in them. I have the same problem. I need a copy editor, and I've written 35 books, but I still need a copy editor. Very important process. Once the copy edit is in, we call it manuscript lock. At that point, no more changes can be made. Then it goes into layout. If your publisher, if you have a publisher, then the publisher will provide layout artists. If you work with any of the companies that do this for you, and I'll review all of those companies in August, they will help you either do the layout for you, or they will give you a template that you can pour your Word document in. And then you can yourself sort of arrange headers and stuff like that. That requires a bit of a skill. So there are a number of very reputable Blurb, for example, is a publisher that we work with, that I have worked with, who for somewhere between $500 and $700 can do the layout for you using any of the templates that you choose. So that's an important process. So because your text looks professional and lay out in a page, and then it goes to the printer. And then there's proof copies are made. You can look at a proof copy, which is very important. Sometimes they do it digitally as a PDF. Sometimes they send you a printed copy. I like to get a printed copy for everything we do at FUP, just to go through the printed copy to make sure that everything is the way it should be. This is the last chance where you can make any changes. And then Ebook Engineering is done. That's a separate subject altogether. Again, we talk about that in August, Ebook Engineering. Most companies do that for you, typically for a charge. Smashwords still does it for free, smashwords.com, but they have limited distribution. So that's a little drawback there. And then that's it, your book is done. That's the process. So on Saturday, August 27th, please write in your calendars, we're going to talk about how we're going to publish your book. Okay, all the many ways in which you can publish your book, either with a closed purse, where you do a lot of work, or where the company that you engage does some of the work, and then for a reasonable amount of money, you can get your book published by that publisher. And I will review all those with you, at least ones that we know of, that we work with. So we can, ebooks, look at the share of ebooks. Right now, of course, Amazon is by far the largest publisher of ebooks. For a while there, it looked like Apple with iBooks. In the beginning, Apple iBooks had a large share, but that share has basically dwindled to virtually nothing. It's really Amazon that now is the leader in ebooks. And of course, printed books is a different story, but also in printed books. I think I've seen a statistic that right now, 2/3 of all books are sold through Amazon. It's a pity because I love bookstores. But that's just the way it is. On December the 3rd, which concludes this cycle, we're going to talk about promoting your book, which is just as important as writing your book. We're going to talk about what you could do in social media, again, based on what we've done at FUP. We're going to talk about audio and video promotion, author videos and podcasts, all things that you have to consider if you want your book to be sold. A book doesn't sell itself, You have to actually go and promote the book. But fortunately, you have things that I didn't have when my first book, when my dissertation was written. back in the 1970s in a distant, far galaxy. You know, we didn't have social media then. So much of this, what I'm talking about here, is all for free. It just takes a little blood, sweat, and tears. That's all, a little bit of investment. How to get endorsements, which are so important. Endorsements from friends, colleagues, your faculty, your external examiner. These are all wonderful sources to get a quote that gets you on Amazon as well as your cover. And finally, media outreach, how you can reach out to journals in your neck of the woods, in your genre, to submit your book for a review by them, how you get an author interview. There's lots of stuff, and public television has tremendous opportunities for authors to be interviewed. You know, there was a time when CNN did that. I mean, I was on CNN one point for my book, In the Footsteps of Jesus. That's gone. It's after Trump, it's CNN, it's all politics now. They no longer do author things, but there's still many, many opportunities for you to be featured. So anyway, that is what we're going to do in the next 2 workshops, but I'm going to stop sharing right now. And here we are all together, and hit me with your questions, with your ideas, with any specific things you want to talk about. Go ahead. Don't be shy.
Jean-Pierre, it's Teresa. Sorry for the backlighting there. Just
Hi,
finishing.
Teresa.
How are you?
Very good. How are you?
I'm just finishing a surfing holiday, so I'm excellent. Been
Wow.
tossed around in the ocean.
Lovely.
Yeah, it's lovely. When you're thinking about self-publishing a book, some of the resources you just gave us, and being published by a publisher, that line is probably blurring a little bit these days too. People that will produce a book at your cost, and then publishers that are independent publishers. You talked a little bit about the cachet. There must be a little less cachet if you're self-publishing your book, no?
Initially, that's true, Teresa. Initially, it's true. I mean, in the early days, when I was a student, we called it vanity press, you know. But there is a trend right now where I always look at Hollywood. Which are the films that gain Oscars? Are they studio films? No, they're not. They're independently produced films. You go back for the last 7 years and you look at Oscar winners, and 85% of those films are independently financed, independently developed, independently produced. So that process is beginning to also permeate the publishing world. There are ways in which you can further protect yourself from that. One is so important, is the element of peer review. And that's why I encourage all of you, when you plan to publish your dissertation, to ask your external examiner to write a preface or a foreword. By having, and I assume that your external examiner is a scholar who is well known in the area in which you operate. I think I cannot imagine the external examiner not wanting to do that, since they served on your dissertation. So they typically know your work. They don't have to read your book, they know your work. And if you can put on the cover with a foreword by so and so and so, that is an incredible imprimatur, regardless of whether you self-publish or, let me say, independently published. There's a difference, of course, it's self-published and independently published, compared to if you're published by Simon & Schuster, for example. So that is one very important way. Maybe your chair can do, if the external examiner can do a preface, maybe the chair can write a brief introduction. The more colleagues of that, these are established voices in academia, the more you can pile that into your book. It doesn't cost anything. It's asking for a favor. The more you get away from that stigma of, oh, I'm being self-published. And now you have a book that has credibility because it's endorsed by leading scholars in the field.
Just two more quick questions on that, if I may. So did you say there's a difference between self-published and independent?
Yes.
And I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in August, but
Okay.
Right now you can basically completely self-publish your book, for example, on a platform like Smashwords, where there is no intervention whatsoever in terms of editorial from the publisher. Or you can engage these group of publishers who are actually involved in the editorial formation, shaping of your, it will cost something. It's usually somewhere between $500 and $800. That's sort of the range. But then your book will look more professional. That is independent publishing. You see the difference?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a few people who raised their hands. Kim Kantajani, my wonderful student.
Hello, Jean-Pierre. How are you?
Oh, it's so great to hear from you.
It's good to see you and hear you as well. Thank you. I sure miss you, but that's a sidebar for another conversation. I don't know if anyone else, if this is a question others might have, but I'm wondering if you have any resources or recommendations of how you would start to, so if we go back more into the sort of structure and the outline idea, there's this, you started in the very beginning about, so what are these insights and, who's the reader, kind of what do I want the outcome in the story to be, right? So I think of the book as having that overarching, what do I want the takeaway to be? What would I want my reader to walk away from this book with? And then each chapter, not only to support that larger overarching objective, but to each have their own, objective, each chapter to have its own, as you say, argument and, key takeaways and insights. But where I'm struggling, I think, is that a lot of my data is a little bit, there's not necessarily a real continuity and flow between each of the things. In some ways, they're these kind of standalone. So I'm been trying to kind of find some resources I've been actually talking to people who might be my ideal reader and said, hey, what kinds of things are you, struggling with? And, you talked about it being persuasive, inspiring, and accessible. So I'm just wondering, where to kind of start with how to, in this process of inverting, right? Because yes, I want to be true to the research and the data, but, I'm also trying to tie this in with real things that are going on in the world today, as you said, the just-in-time data. So I'm just struggling a little bit with how to take this and sort of massage it into a sort of cohesive narrative.
Okay. Let me give you, of course, I'm very familiar with your dissertation. Let me give you an example. I read some books by therapists, and let's say therapists on child rearing or sexuality or whatever. And what these therapists typically do is they make every chapter a case study of a particular couple. So a very clean, simple way in your case is to take 10, 12, 15 of your interviewees and shape them into a case study. Now, of course, you would need to know a little bit more. You would, of course, you don't want to identify these people, but you would want to sort of set the stage for each case study. This is a mother who went through this, and of course you have that information. You describe, not identifying her, but you set the stage for this case study, and then you launch into what this particular individual that you interviewed, what unique insights that interview gave you, again, towards the overarching narrative of how single mothers are such successful entrepreneurs. And so that is a very simple way to structure it. I didn't start with that because most of you who are listening in did interviews. And of course, it's a very easy way to structure the way. And this may be very much the structure that you want to pursue. The other way is to do it thematically, to break down, in your case, aspects of motherhood, aspects of entrepreneurship, and do it thematically that way. Then mix your data, your interviewees in each of those chapters. But those are ways in which you can segment your chapters. The important thing is that you start giving readily practical, actionable data from the beginning, and not all the way in the back end, in your data chapter. That's basically the thrust of my story, is right from the get-go. You have to sort of open up your kimono and start feeding key insights. And so the case study approach, I think, based on specific interviews, can work very well for yours and for many other books as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that reiteration, because I will say that, when I wasn't able to get my proposal in by the May 1st deadline, but I was working on it. And when I went to go look at comparative works, I was actually, and I think I actually got deviated and got discouraged, because a lot of even the really popular books or bestsellers, I felt like I was reading them and never landing anywhere. I mean, many of them there weren't key takeaways. Like, they may have been rah, 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 and a lot of inspiration by some really somewhat famous people, but I wasn't getting, I wasn't finding there to be key takeaways. So I appreciate this idea of seeding them from the very beginning. I do think that's important.
And I do want your proposal, Kim, because we talked about it throughout the process of,
yes,
developing your dissertation. This has got to be a book. By the way, the next intake is September 1st for your proposals. So
I thought it was going to be a whole other year, and then I got discouraged by that also.
No. We decided.
Okay, good to know.
We decided there were so many rich. I cannot divulge the proposals that we chose, and those people, some of them are on this call, by the way, will receive the good news, hopefully the good news in the next week or two, but once I get over my jet lag. But yeah, we'll have another intake September 1st, because in fact I got another submission yesterday, which looked interesting, but we have to say, gee, it doesn't work for our cycle. The thing to remember is that we are a very small publisher, and so we're limited in our budget to how many we can absorb in a particular cycle, and we run with feeling June to June. So, but yeah, it goes for all of you on this call. So if you have a book proposal, please, and you want to submit it to us, September 1st is the deadline. But again, of course, in August, we will talk also about many other ways you can publish. The important thing is that you publish the book. Who ultimately, how are you going to do that? That's second verse. You want to publish the book. Okay, I'm looking at some people who raised their hand. Lisa Riviere, you had a raised hand. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, yes, thank you, Dr. Jean-Pierre, for the insights today. And I had a quick question on, so previously in, I believe, other maybe workshops or series, you talked about the difference in a path. Once you self-publish, it may be more of a challenge to go the traditional publishing route. Have you found that to be true overall, or is it easy to navigate between the two?
That's a very good question, Lisa. Let me just say at this point, because it changes all the time. At this point, most publishers, mainstream publishers, and they've basically been consolidated into three major behemoth publishers, understand that a self-published book is not necessarily something that works against you. I mean, many publishers, many newly minted PhDs, they recognize that self-publishing is a very attractive way to get in the marketplace very quickly. So I don't think, as of today, certainly after the pandemic, that is the negative that it certainly once was. Having said that, though, I think that independent publishing, if you can afford it, would probably be better than the self-publishing route, where you simply do your own layouts, you do your own formatting, your own copy editing, and then you put it out there, for example, through Smashwords. I think that those carry somewhat of a lesser status than if you work with a company like Blurb. There are many more, and we'll mention many more. Blurb.com is just simply one that we, as part of our review, we tested, and they were really great to work with. They had great customer service. They were responsive. Their book looked absolutely fantastic. They do hardcover as well as softcover, which Amazon did not for a long time. They're now doing it on a beta test only basis. So I would say, certainly if you independently publish, that is not a strike against you. No, not at this point.
Yeah, thank you. And a follow-up question to that too, as well. So if we're looking to transitioning into teaching post-secondary and different maybe institutions, how we talked about credibility before can help us connect to kind of the classroom or scholar practitioner focus.
Right. Well, so if you want to pursue an academic career, such as that one, then there is nothing like a article in a peer-reviewed journal. That is still the gold standard for specifically an academic career. Practitioners don't really care. I mean, if you deal with a practitioner audience and you see yourself as a coach, for example, or working as a practitioner in the private sector, it's having a peer-reviewed journal does not carry the weight as you do if you go for a educational or academic career. Then certainly it is important that you try at least to get an article published in a peer-reviewed journal, legitimate, because there's lots of illegitimate out there. The problem is, Lisa, and I think we discussed that before, is that it's difficult to get into those journals right now. And once you get into the journal, once you're in a review cycle, you cannot submit that journal anywhere else. And a review cycle at a journal is typically 6 to 9 months. So you're frozen during that time. And then when you come out of it and they say no, then you have to start all over again, which is why I encourage folks who want to pursue an academic career to certainly submit an article to a journal, but don't use your entire dissertation. Segment elements from your dissertation and turn that into individual articles, so that when you are in review with journal A, you can still then write another article on another part of your dissertation for journal B, so that you're not completely paralyzed during that time. But yes, I think that is certainly a very important requirement. The second important requirement, I would say, is that if you publish, whether you publish independently or with a publisher, is, as we just discussed, to have both your chair and your examiner write a foreword and a preface, and have there's names on the cover. That is an incredible imprimatur. That really gives your work credibility, and there's no reason why your chair and external examiner shouldn't do that. Goes for all of you. If you write a book, reach out to your external, reach out to your chair, say, would you mind writing a 1-page, it doesn't really matter how long it is, a 1-page, maximum 2-page preface. Basically what you want is their name to endorse your work. And if you do that, Lisa, then that will be considered a very credible publication, regardless of who the publisher is, who's behind it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. We have Christy Harrison. Christy?
Yeah, hi, good morning, or yeah, still morning, yeah, afternoon here. Thank you. And I'm still focusing the question. I am in the final stages of the dissertation. It's in the committee's hands. We're getting really, really close. Have had some excellent editorial support on that process. And I also got some guidance, which I did accept a little bit begrudgingly, to separate the story of my journey on the dissertation with the story of the dissertation study itself. And my research is as a white researcher, researching white women in classrooms of Black and brown children. And I struggled with my own, at every turn from beginning to end, of how am I doing this in the most ethical, most right, most helpful way to advance the cause of greater success for students. And so I wonder if you have any thoughts on, from the book stage, how and if and where and when can I weave those back together?
Well, it's a good question, Christy, and it comes back to, what is the purpose? What is the story you want to tell? Do you want to tell the story of how white teachers face unique challenges in a Black classroom or a minority classroom? Or is the story about you researching these challenges? And the question is, what does your reader want to hear about? You know, what does your reader want to hear about? To me, you know, my guide to authors at FUP is to not too much make it about you. The problem is, if you make it too much about you by using the first person, the applicability and the credibility of your data is compromised, because it feels like, well, it's just her idea. You see what I'm saying? If you make yourself too much the protagonist of the story, then we lose that sense of, she's really giving us a full canvas of the available literature and experience of this particular problem. It's a natural impulse. You want to talk about the things that, you know, I can imagine the tremendous challenges you faced, and that is a story in itself. And so perhaps that could be a separate article. Perhaps that could be a separate book. But I think that if you want to make, and I think your dissertation is a wonderful subject, if you want to make write the story of a white teacher in a minority classroom, then I think the reader, which will be parents, will want to know what those challenges are, rather than what unique difficulties you had as a researcher in arriving or identifying these challenges. You see what I'm saying? Doesn't mean that your own experience is not valid. That's perhaps not something that your reader is interested in. Your reader wants to know, how does a white teacher cope with that problem? How does a white teacher behave in a minority classroom? So it goes back to what we started with. What is the story you want to tell? What is the story you want to tell? And certainly, if that is the key topic, if the story is white teachers in a minority classroom, you can certainly weave in some of those things because they're an extension. I mean, you are a white teacher, and so in a white researcher, so you can certainly weave in some of those things in a very subtle manner. But the overarching story should be what we decided on, which is how white teachers cope in a minority classroom. Does that make sense?
It does. I hear you. Especially for the book, I feel like maybe my story is more a cautionary tale or a heads up tale for a journal article for scholars.
Yeah.
I hear you what you're saying. Thank you.
That's because that goes into the research aspect of it, the research modality of it. And I think that would be a wonderful academic article. And then, just like we discussed, you get two for the price of one. You get a journal article and you get a book.
Thank you. Thanks for exploring it.
Very good. Thank you, Christy. Laurie.
I think you probably already answered my question between Christy and Lisa, but I'm going to ask anyway because I'm just excited to have your ear today. So, and I so appreciate you doing all of these series for us. This is just so valuable. So my work, I think, speaks to multiple areas. So my idea is to, as you had just said, kind of get two out of one. So my first tentative title really focuses on the lived experiences of my participants, of myself. So again, the tentative title is Fit Recovery. And then, as you said, to maybe have a little caption below, stories of addicted lives transformed through fitness. And so in that, my chapters, I guess my main question is, in that space, in that publication, how much is too much? Because my thought was, you know, from these interviews, from this work, I came up with a model. There's 7 phases. And so my initial instinct was to develop the chapters based on these phenomenons that I identified, and then share the participants' stories and how those concepts influenced their recovery. But again, you know, when you talk about, you want to make sure that the reader knows the so what, you know, behind all that. And then I was thinking on the latter end, after that project was done, or maybe simultaneously, to speak to the scholar practitioner population, then sort of write about my model and how I came up with that. And that would be, I think, great, like you said, for an article of scholarly work. So I just wanted to get your ideas on that.
No, I think this is a great subject, and recovery through fitness. Now, help me understand, what are these people recovering from? Is it addiction?
Substance use disorder.
Yeah. So that, I think, is a fantastic book. Mitch, how far are you in your dissertation?
Oh, I'm done. I'm just waiting for the fielding proofreaders to get back to me. So I should be completely, you know, hopefully everything published by August.
Oh, okay. Well, we definitely I would love to see a book proposal on this, whether we can publish it or not. I mean, I definitely want to give my feedback to it. I think you have a great subject there. Really.
Great.
Yeah. So,
and you think it would be like, it wouldn't be too much to kind of break out the 7?
No, I think the 7 phases that you identify wouldn't be a very natural breakdown of the outline. I mean, you would start with an introduction where you sketch the problem, you know, the addiction problem. That would be introduction. And of course, you would definitely want to have a preface by your external and maybe a short intro by your chair. Then go into, you know, the situation we have in the United States or Canada regarding addiction, which is a growing problem. How you can, I would say at that point, you can talk about what are some of the specific treatments that are available out there, the rehab facilities, why they work or not work, the costs involved in that, why that is really out of reach for many people, the whole rehab situation, how insurance companies deal with that, la, 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 la. You sketch the problem, right? And then I would go into next chapter, the behavioral fitness, and why you developed this idea, how you came about it. This is where you can talk a little bit about your own experience, how you arrived at the solution of let's use fitness, what fitness can do, maybe a story about some of the biological underpinnings of that process, you know, how fitness rearranges your metabolism, your neurological functioning, blah, blah, blah. And then after that introduction, I would then go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, absolutely, because it then becomes a how-to book. It becomes a book of you know, any person who struggles with addiction, whether himself or as a parent with children. Oh my God, Lori, this would be a fantastic book. And then run through the phases all the way through 7, and then conclusion. What have we learned? How many people have gone through the program? What is their feedback on the program? What are the challenges of sticking with the program? You know, do they need gym memberships? Do they need a trainer? All these things where you again balance sort of the challenges, pro and con, but then come together with a very rounded conclusion. That is the book I see, which would be a fantastic book.
Right. Yeah, and I have, you know, a lot of that's my literature review. And so I basically, like what you're saying, though I would have to go back and get some of that more real-time data, because as someone just was posting, you know, fentanyl crisis has now increased. So a lot of, you know, my data is, again, just, it doesn't really have a lot of the fentanyl information in it. So, but yeah. Great. But Thank you so much for your feedback.
Sure, Lori. One thing that I want to communicate to all of you is don't feel pressured to always be on top of what's happening. Because I've had people very anxious while they were writing the dissertation saying, oh, look, this article just came out, or look, this thing just happened. And oh my God, now my dissertation is, don't feel, you try to stay on top of things in a reasonable way, but don't feel like panic when something happens that is not reflected in your book. The essential principles always stay the same, certainly when it comes to substance abuse and recovery. Thank you, Lori. All right, anyone else? I don't see any hands up, but open microphone at this point. Go ahead.
Jean-Pierre, Pauline just raised the hand.
Okay, Pauline.
Hi, this is a really nit thing, but when you're writing a manuscript is important. In one of the other workshops that you did, you talked about a very different endnote technique that I'm seeing in more and more books. And that is, instead of having the number in the text, having a couple bolded words, and then in the networks, in the endnotes, using those bolded words. My publishers agreed to let me try that. And the reason I like it, because I read a lot of books, is it doesn't interrupt. I'm constantly going back. And what this does is it actually helps the flow of your book such that people aren't leaving the text. The nerds like me aren't leaving the text. So I'm wondering, I feel like it makes the book more accessible to the average reader. It doesn't feel as academic in that way. So I'd be interested in your comments on one technique versus the other.
Oh, absolutely, Pauline. The problem with endnotes, first of all, never use footnotes. Never use footnotes. Footnotes are really academically looking. And that works in a journal article, but not in a book. Endnotes work, but what I did in my book, 10 Prayers That Changed the World, is that I didn't even bold it. What I did in the endnote section, I broke it down by chapter, and then I briefly reiterated part of the sentence that the endnote refers to, and then I gave the endnote.
Right.
So I would think that even bolding could sometimes be, because people say, wait, why is this bolded? But that's up to your publisher,
What I meant was the bolding, exactly, chapter by chapter.
Okay, yeah.
And the way to introduce it is to refer back to
That's
what
right.
was. So in other words, there's no bolding, there's no reference other than in this back section. That is and I'm seeing that in more and more books.
Absolutely, it's really a wonderful way to do things, and it's difficult because so many of our authors are dyed-in-the-wool scholars. They just love those little numbers. But again, it goes back to the question: who's your reader? If your reader is a purely scholarly audience, you can get away with it. But if you, for example, have coaches, a lot of our books address coaches. They don't want to have all that academia stuff. They want to learn more about things, about your sources and information, but having a narrative endnote, that's how it's described, as a narrative endnote, where you basically reiterate part of the sentence that the endnote refers to, organized by chapter, and then you provide your commentary, is a wonderful way to deal with that information. Absolutely.
Your formatting comments were kind of this cautionary note. So I'm interested in knowing, when you use that technique, you don't do it in a separate document, but you literally do it at the end of your manuscript. I'm just interested in the technique you use to make that work.
Yeah, it's interesting because the book that I just finished is being published by Polistampa in Europe, and by another company in the US. And Polistampa in Italy decided to do the endnotes after each chapter. And the publisher in the US decided to do the endnotes at the end of the book. So there is, I prefer at the end of the book, because once again, if you have endnotes or bibliographical references after each chapter, it looks very academically. And for the average reader, it's a bit of a turnoff. So my recommendation would be to do it at the end of the book.
And do you store them in a separate document, is my question.
Well, what I do is when I go through, it's basically however you like to work. What I do is, quite frankly, if I must confess, is I use the word numeral system to keep track of where the endnotes go. But then when I actually compile them, I take the word numeral out. But that's just my way of working. You can certainly keep a separate Word document open where you say, oh, here I need an endnote so-and-so, and then you write it out. Because you typically you have the source right there and then, the reference, the citation. So you want to capture it while you're there. You don't want to have to go back and hunt for it later on. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Good question. Gail raised her hand.
Hi, Jean-Pierre. This is such a wonderful, wonderful workshop. I learn every time I attend. I have a question. I am thinking about turning my dissertation into a book, and I was going to do some writing over the summer. But when I look at how to outline it, I actually had 6 themes that came out of the dissertation: access to opportunity, relational mitigating factors, authentic learning, intentional leadership, creative thinking, and trauma and informed approaches. And I did write on all of those things. So it feels like too much to me, that I should narrow this down in writing a book. And I was wondering if you had any suggestions. One thing I did think about was full steam ahead when I did that video and submitted it the very first session I had with you.
Yes.
And that was so much fun doing, but it was all about possibilities. So I'm not sure where to start.
Well, that's a good question, Gail. And the thing is that we have to keep in mind is what tangible values does your research have for your reader? What is your reader expecting to get from the book? And so some of the chapter headers that you describe right now feel a little ponderous to me. It feel a little theoretical. We want to see if you can turn it into some more of a practical takeaway for your reader. What is your reader going to learn in each of those chapters? What is it that, and so this is difficult because we are, of course, dissertation writers, right? So we literally have to transplant ourselves into the seat of a reader. And we know our dissertations very well. We live and breathe the dissertation. But now we have to think about a reader, an average reader, or the reader that you've identified for your book. What is she or he trying to expect in leadership, from leadership and in your book? And so when you do that, crystallize in each of those chapters, what is the principal takeaway? And see if you can formulate that into very simple, straightforward language that really appeals to the reader, So positive leadership, something like that, or leadership in crisis, leadership in crisis, in trauma. And so if you make it very concise and very accessible, then by the same token, the purpose of each chapter will become more sharp and more defined.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Gail. All right, we have a few more minutes, 5 more minutes. Any more questions? Well, folks, I hope this has been a valuable 2 hours spent on your Saturday morning or your Saturday afternoon. And it's been wonderful to see many of you. I see Ivani, which is wonderful to see you, Ivani. You look great. And I'm so pleased that we stay in touch. And I'm excited by the work you do. And that goes for all of you. So the important takeaway from this session is write a book based on your dissertation. We're going to worry about how we're going to publish it in my next workshop in August. But for the next 3 months, why don't you go through that outline exercise? Let's see if we can do that. Let's go through that outline exercise. Let's create that bulleted list with a brief description of what each chapter will be about, what each chapter will cover, and who your reader will be. If we can come together in August with those outline fleshed out, I think you will have a much better idea of what your book will be about. And at that point, things will become much simpler. So Hillary is not on the call because she is recovering from their wonderful alumni conference. But of course, if you are not a member of the Alumni Association, please do so. If you are a student, you can attend these workshops with absolutely no problem. If you're an alumna or alumnus, you can more than welcome to attend, but we just ask you to register with Hillary. This recording will be available on the Alumni Association website. I will also post my PowerPoint there so you can refer to it. And that is the end of my presentation today. I wish you all a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Take a few minutes to relax and let your brain roam free. And when you do that, all those ideas will come to you without any problem. So with that, have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all in August again. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.